Hello. And as you can tell, before we even get started, we're a little bit exposed, a little overexposed, but that's fine. We are actually in the process of doing a podcast in the middle of the woods. This is a new thing for me, and as you can see, kind of a weird setup, but that's okay because here we have Chris Selle, and he's here to tell you some interesting stories.
What is up?
But first, I want to set a little bit of context as to what we are going to be talking about and a little bit of what's been happening lately. So, I want to just start this off by saying that someone that we were both very close to recently passed away. His name was Chase Connors. He was a very good guy. He had a very huge influence on the youth. He did parkour, and parkour is something we're going to be talking about in this podcast quite a bit. So I just wanted to start off and just say, pay a little bit of respects to Chase Connors and say rest in peace. Rest in peace, Chase. Okay, so here is Chris Selle. Chris Selle, me and him have known each other for a very long time, and ironically, we are in the place that we kind of met. We're in Marion County, Georgia. We both grew up here in the woods, and it's kind of interesting because I feel like the fact that me and him grew up in the woods in a country town like this, and when I say country, I'm not talking about like the nearest Walmart's 20 minutes away. I'm talking about the nearest city with anything in it is like 45 minutes away. So I'm talking about the middle of nowhere. And so we grew up in the middle of nowhere, and the high school that we went to was actually 3 counties in one. That's how small this town is. 3 counties, 1 high school. It eventually changed, but that's besides the point. The point that I'm getting at is that I think me and Chris both have kind of like a adventurous mindset, and that's how I think we kind of came to know each other and become friends, is just basically like we had this like-minded perspective of, we don't really belong in this confined, small town environment where everybody knows everything about everybody. We had more of an adventurous mindset, so we wanted to go out and experience life. We both did things a little bit differently. Chris, he traveled the entire world. He even lived in China for a few years, and he's going to talk about that. I took a little bit of a more entrepreneurial approach and focused my adventurous mode, I guess you could say, into other things. But yeah, that was just kind of the context I wanted to lay out. So if you don't know who Chris Selle is, now you know a little bit about him. And so how are you doing, Chris?
Pretty good.
How's your day?
It's been a good day. Had a cup of coffee. Had a nice little scrambled dog. Got to cuddle up to a puppy. It was nice.
Yeah, that does sound like a pretty good way to start the day. Coffee and scrambled dog, though. I don't know, man. But how do you feel? I guess I kind of want to talk about parkour, but I want to go through the things in like a logical timeline of events that happened. So let's start with, how did you end up in Marion County?
Ended up in Marion County when I got adopted by my grandparents, and grew up in Marion County from pre-K all the way to high school.
And would you say that what I said earlier is accurate about like kind of being in a small town and having that adventurous mindset and feeling contained?
I would definitely say so, because like in the idea of like small town, like it's one of those towns where you have a courthouse, a square around the courthouse, and then that's the town. I remember coming to Buena Vista with some of my friends from college. I was like, all right, guys, we're now entering the town. I put a song on the radio. The song was like 5 minutes long. Before the song was over, we were 2 miles out of town, having already drove through the entire city.
Yeah, and I can honestly say that you can get from one end of the county to the complete other end of the county in 20 minutes. So
I mean, when I was a kid, I would go grocery shopping with my mom. We would go to one store, and she'd be like, well, next we're going to this store. That was on the other side of the city. I would run and beat her because she had to follow the road, and I could just run straight.
Yeah, I know exactly probably which stores you're talking about, too. That kind of brings me to an interesting point, though, is Buena Vista, with it being the way that it is, and it's like you said, there's a courthouse, and then there's just a square of businesses around the courthouse. These are all like mom and pop shops, pizza places, restaurants in general, like general small stores, convenience items, that sort of thing. And because it's that open kind of area, everything we did, everybody saw. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like we climbed on top of buildings and got caught a few times, and we would do things like maybe skip church or something, and everybody would find out. I think one time actually we got on top of the Mexican restaurant in Buena Vista, got caught, and while we went to like a church. While we were in church, a cop just walks in and is like, "Hey, can you guys come upstairs?" And he basically just tells us like, "Don't ever do that again." But yeah, so that's the kind of like stuff we would get into. But the country life itself, like when we went to school, I feel like a lot of people really belonged there. You know, there was like a lot of, I hate to say the term redneck because I feel like a lot of people take offense to that, but I really don't know what else to call it.
I mean, like you would have kids come into school dressed in all camo, not because they liked wearing all camo, but because they went hunting with their dad that morning.
Yeah, exactly. Like no joke. and they were going to go after school too. So
yeah.
You might as well, like, why not wear camo? But a lot of people really belonged there and really enjoyed it. And then there was like a small group of people who were like, why are we even here? And so I guess I think that the containment of the energy of us wanting to go out and adventure, like the fact that it stayed contained for so long, when we finally graduated high school and were able to go out on our own, it was amplified, right? So it was like everything that a normal person would do when they have an adventurous mindset was now going to be exaggerated because it's been confined for so long. Like we had an itch. And so you ended up like traveling the entire world. How many countries have you been to?
Around 30.
30 countries. Okay. I haven't even left the United States, so...
I currently need to get a new passport, not because it's expired, but because I can't fit any more stamps in my passport.
Interesting. That's a good problem to have. Where did you start, and like, what was the first country you went to, and just, I guess, tell me some of your stories.
The first country I went to was Mexico on like a missions trip with the church that we were going to. Went there to help build a school for the deaf kids, which was pretty awesome. Getting to see a different country. I remember I had some of the best hamburgers I ever had down there. Just some random dude in a street cart, like cooking up some street food. There was one point where we went to a shopping district that was like pretty high end, like you would expect at a bigger city, like multi-floor buildings, and they're like, all right, let's show you guys something. We drove like 5 minutes in one direction, and then there were people living in dirt floor houses that were built out of stolen street signs.
That sounds legit. And also, just on that note, I have heard that Mexican street food is some of the best food you can get in the entire world. And
so I grew up, and every time I found, I was like, hey, let's go eat Mexican tonight. I hated it. Like Mexican food in the U.S., I absolutely hated it as a kid. Like the weird pico to whatever that they put on it that I've like never seen in actual Mexico and all this stuff. I'm like, the food was just horrible. And then I went to Mexico, and it was completely different. And it was some of the best food I've ever had in my life. And since then, like in Columbus, I found like random hole-in-the-wall restaurants that are actual Mexican food. And it's nothing like the commercialized Mexican places where we're like, oh, let's go get margaritas. Like, no, that's not a thing like actual Mexican food.
What is Mexican food like?
Well, for one, the tacos are a bit different, more corn tortilla. It's more seasoning in the meat. Like, there's just a lot of extra stuff that they throw on the plates here in the U.S., like the fried...
Do they put as much cheese on stuff in Mexico?
I mean,
I thought that was an American
quesadillas
thing.
can be pretty greasy, but like I remember the one I got in Mexico, like it had like avocados on it, like fried eggs on the burger, and like other stuff. I mean, it's a Mexican street food vendor guy, like cooking up burgers. It's like, I've never seen this at a place like in the U.S.
Yeah,
I'm sure there are some. And then I remember there was this type of like corn street food where they would like take a corn on the cob, grill it, shave it off, and like throw some like special sauce in it and just give it to you in a cup. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good actually. So Mexico was the first country you went to, but that was when you were, that was younger. You were younger, but like when you, what was the first country that you yourself went to that wasn't part of like a group trip?
Well, it kind of was part of a group trip. So back onto the topic of parkour, when I got older, I was an adult at this point. I went on a missions trip with another church to the Czech Republic. And I found out that Crap Invaders, which at this time was like back in 2013.
And that's KRAP, folks.
Yeah, KRAP, which is like park spelled backwards. But at the time, like back in 2013, it was the biggest parkour event in Europe. And I found out it was happening the weekend after we were supposed to fly back to the U.S. from the Czech Republic and Italy. So I contacted the guy who was in charge of the missions trip. I was like, hey, do you mind pushing my return flight back a week? He's like, well, it'll be an extra $100. I'm like, cool, I'll pay the extra 100. So I went to the Czech Republic, and it was my second time going to the Czech Republic on this trip. With this church, so because I'd gone the year before, so it was my second time in Europe at this point. We went, did the missions trip. It was awesome. We went to a teen challenge, which is like a drug rehab facility, so we were kind of like essentially helping out there, like around the facility with people who were in the program.
So not to interrupt, I just have a question on that. Is most of the trips that you've done around the world been missionary based, like where you've been trying to help people?
No, I think I've only done 3 missionary based trips.
Okay. So we're about to go back into your world trips and everything, but because we're already talking about parkour, and I feel like a lot of people might not know what that is, or just have questions about that, let's take a break on that, just a quick stop. Let's talk about parkour, how we got into parkour, what it is, what grew out of that, and then let's continue back on that story, okay? So just so everybody knows, parkour is basically, it started off as a French military discipline where people would use their bodies to overcome obstacles, and also you could help other people overcome those obstacles as well if they were injured. And so it was very obstacle based, basically. It wasn't a type of combat in any way. It was more of a form of like, how can I get from point A to point B as quickly and efficiently as possible?
Yeah, and it was especially taught to the firefighters in France.
That's true.
In France, the fire department was a sect of the military, and a big part of it was so they could use these skills to get in and out of burning buildings easily. If they get into a building and they find someone who's injured, being able to like pick the person up and like get back out of the building.
And wasn't it, I want to say it was David Bell's father that kind of introduced that idea. And so David Bell...
Well, he didn't introduce the idea. There was someone else that introduced it into them. But then David Bell's dad learned it when he was a firefighter in the military.
Okay. And so he kind of coined it.
Yeah,
no, he didn't coin it. It's
he
David
didn't
Bell
coin
did.
it. I think it was Raymond Bell. But he like went back, started teaching it to his kid David, and David like showed it to his friends, and then they just pretty much were like, all right, let's run around town and like practice this stuff.
Yeah. So his dad basically was like training this stuff for survival purposes, and his son was like, this is awesome, let's like, I'm bored, and the buildings, and I think it was like Nice, France, were perfect for parkour. I mean, perfect. It was all like these square buildings with these perfect staircases for jumping and climbing. And so obviously, like, someone that has that perspective and was introduced to that by their father of all people is going to have some fun with it. And so David Bell, and there's a separate history with Sebastian Faucon as well, but I don't want to get too locked in on the history. He eventually coined the idea of parkour, started uploading videos of himself doing it. People like us in the OG days, I'll call it like 2006, 2007, started seeing these videos. And then other people started popping up, like people from American Parkour in the forums. And we got involved with that early on. Me, Chris over here, and a guy named Raymond Harper, who's unfortunately not here with us physically today. He's somewhere out there in the world. Hopefully we'll see him again. But we live in the middle of nowhere, and so we're like not able to do normal parkour like we're seeing in the videos. So we're just finding trees that look cool to climb and jump on and vault. We maybe somebody's gate, like we'll just vault over somebody's gate in their driveway. Hopefully we don't get caught.
For those wondering, a vault, so in the terms of parkour, vaulting is jumping over something with your hands.
Yeah.
It's using your hands to help you get over something.
Yep, exactly.
But within the ideas of parkour, as you learn it, you learn like there's 20 different ways to use your hands to get over something, and you start learning like what are the most efficient ways to get over things in different scenarios.
Yep, and you'd be surprised how efficient or how many different ways you can vault and how each one applies to a different situation. So like a speed vault might make a lot of sense if you're already moving at a lot of momentum, but maybe a monkey vault makes sense if you're trying to get high on top of something, or a Kong vault might make sense if you're trying to get over something long. There's a lot of those. And so we're just...
Or even a gate vault if you live out in the country and you're getting chased by a bull because you're trying to cow tip.
Exactly. We did parkour, and we started to really get into it after about 6 months or so. I would say we were doing parkour every single day, almost nonstop. And then we were doing it at high school in Buena Vista. And then there came a point in time where we wanted to try to find other people that were like us. And so there was a town about 45 minutes from Marion County called Columbus, Georgia, Well, I'm wearing you can't see it because the laptop is in the way, but I'm wearing a Columbus Parkour shirt. Maybe I can do that. But we found a group of people that were consistently meeting up. Zach Howard, I think Elliot
Banks.
Yep, Elliot and Dwayne, maybe. I don't remember. But no, he was later on. But we found some dudes that were all like into parkour, so we met up with them. And that grew, without going into too much detail, into a huge community, even to this day. And so that is our story with parkour. I wanted to kind of explain how, like, what it is and how it had turned into a huge part of our lives. Chris ended up actually doing some things like building a bunch of obstacles for big events with like American parkour and such. And so he's more involved, I think, with like events and stuff like that than I am. So that's, I think, how you ended up getting involved with Crap Jam. All right. So with all of that out of the way, I'll hand it back over to you.
Yeah, and with that, kind of like I was talking about going to Crap Invaders, essentially what a big parkour event is usually like is essentially it's about getting over obstacles. But usually anytime there are people that practice it, each city sometimes has a very niche group of people. Usually each parkour group, I would say, is anywhere from like 3 to 10 people. They're usually not large groups in cities. So a parkour event, or a parkour jam as they usually call them, is an event where tons of people from different areas can all come together and practice together. Like you may have 5 people coming from one city, 10 people from another. An event I went to in DC, you'd have people flying in from all over the country, and you'd have over 600 people coming together with this common interest to practice it together. And essentially you would build, whoever's hosting it would either go to a place that's really good for parkour, where like 100 people can be training together at once, or some events like Crap Invaders, they would build entire parks out of scaffolding, logs, walls, like anything they can think of to create a park so that hundreds of people can come together and like practice this together.
Yeah, and on that note, one thing that I find really interesting about the parkour community and the parkour art form as a whole in general is like, people don't really know this, but it's got this weird culture that is so unique to parkour. It is the most unique to parkour, and it's really hard to explain or to put into words. You'd really have to experience it, but the best way that I can really explain it is like he said, every city kind of has like a small parkour group of core members. People come and go, but it's like a family. And a family or a culture behaves in a very specific way. And there's certain untold things that you just kind of understand, and mannerisms that you hold, and things and ways that you act. And to have communities come together at a jam like that, first of all, there's a common cause, which is parkour. And having like all of these different types of personalities together under the same cause is like, it's just one of the coolest things you could do. And so we became obsessed with it. But Crap Jam, where did you... I'm kind of interested in like how some of the other countries you went to too, though. You went to like Myanmar.
The big thing with Crap Invaders is with that, it was more than just going to Crap Invaders, because I essentially went on that mission trip to the Czech Republic. When the trip wrapped up, everyone was getting on a plane, flying back to the U.S., which I kind of got jealous of them because they got stuck in France, so they got to go explore Paris.
Omelette du fromage.
I was sitting there in Italy. I was like, well, I'm in Italy, but like, I've never been to France. Like, you guys are at the Eiffel Tower. What the heck? But anyway, like while they were doing that, I was getting on a separate plane, flying solo to Italy. Now, Crap Invaders back then was hosted by the Krapanon Parkour Gym, which was way up in the mountains of northern Italy. Like the closest major city would be Milan. And Milan was a 3.5-hour drive from where the event was. So I ended up finding a special ticket where essentially they would pick up people in Milan in a bus and drive you there. So I ended up landing in Milan, Italy, probably 4 or 5 days before Crap Invaders happened. And then while I was there, I was like, you know what, let's just explore Italy. So I got like a little hotel room, and like this turns out that they call their floors pianos. So I was like on the 3rd piano of this like Italian place. would just like go explore. I found out that they had these like little bike kiosks, and now you see like the little bike riding shares. Those are kind of getting off the ground in Milan at this point, except it was kiosk based. So you go to a kiosk, you could rent a bike, drive it to another kiosk, and then park it. So I would like leave the place, get a bike, ride it like 2 miles to another place in Milan, hook it in, and I found out that the World's Fair was taking place that year in Milan. For those who don't know what the World's Fair is, it's kind of like this big Olympic-sized like tier event where basically when a city, they figure out they're hosting it years in advance, and they start like building a massive complex just for it. And they'll usually pick a topic and have countries from all over the world come together to show what they're representing in terms of the topic. Well, the event in Milan, the topic was food. So I was like, okay, I'm going to this thing.
Yes.
So I like found a place. I was like,
sir.
oh, how much are tickets? They're like, oh, it's like $40 a day. I was like, all right, cool. I'll get tickets. I'm here in Milan for 4 days. Give me 2 of the tickets. So I went to this thing. Yeah.
You pay $40 for the ticket. Do you also have to pay for the food, or do you get a bunch of free food?
No, you have to pay for the food. That just gets you into the event.
Oh, well.
Which when you get there, it was like Disney World almost kind of. Mm-hmm. It's like you get there, and every World's Fair, or these days they call them Expo, like currently there's one going on in Dubai, Expo 2020. It's supposed to be in 2020. It's at the very tail end. It ends this March, and then the next one will be somewhere else, probably in 2 or 3 years.
Is it still called Expo 2020, even though it's 2022?
Yeah, they were supposed to do it in 2020, but COVID happened and they pushed it back a year.
Okay, so but it's actually called Expo 2020.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's cool.
When I went to it, was like Expo 2015, 2016. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I went there, and the way they had it set up is when you got there was this giant breezeway that went through the entire event. From one end of this breezeway to the other, it was like fully covered, like awnings and stuff, but it was over a mile long from one end of this thing to the other. And as you're walking down this massive court, like this massive like awning, there's just these giant buildings on all sides, and the buildings were pavilions representing each country. And as you're walking, you just see these national flags, like, oh, here's the Czech Republic one, here's the Italy one, way down at the very end, here's the American one.
Was it hamburgers and hot dogs?
I'll get to that with the U.S.
Okay.
So, and essentially what a lot of the countries were doing is they would build these pavilions, and the pavilions would be like architectural masterpieces. Like, it wasn't a random building they popped up. Like, they hired like world-class architects to design these buildings. Like the one for Brazil, when you walked in probably a good 100 or 200 feet on a cargo net. Like the floor was a cargo net, and it like went up into the second floor thing. So as you're walking, you're on a cargo net walking over a rainforest, basically.
Oh my God.
And then you get to the very end of it, and there's like a little thing, and then you walk back down, and now you're walking back out of their pavilion through the rainforest with the cargo net over you, with people walking over the top of you on the cargo net.
That is awesome.
And I'm just like, what kind of place is this? This is insane. And as you're walking through, they had these little things like, oh, this is this tree from Brazil. This is this plant. This is this plant. Because some of the pavilions, they were like trying to show like, all right, topic is food. So what are we doing to help with agriculture? What are we doing to help with world hunger? Like, I went to the Israeli one, and in it I found out that Israel invented the drip tape that you see. Like, you go to Walmart, you see a little plastic tube running through the bed of trees. Like, that was invented by Israel because it helps them save water in a desert climate. And they're like, oh, and Israel also invented cherry tomatoes because cherry tomatoes are made to not need a lot of water in desert climates. They're like, that's why if you overwater a cherry tomato, it explodes, because they were engineered to be grown in the desert.
Okay. And it's interesting to me because you didn't even know what you were getting yourself into.
No, I was just like, I'm going.
Just some random event? I bet it'll be okay. And then you get there, and it's like one of the coolest things that the world puts together.
There was a giant pavilion completely dedicated to coffee, and the entire pavilion, this thing was like 5 stories tall, was like made of a lattice of woodwork. To where you could see from the ground all the way through the ceiling, and it was just a lattice of like wood timbers like going in tons of different directions building this thing. And then like Ghirardelli, the chocolate maker, had an entire pavilion like, yeah, this is how we make chocolate. And I'm like, cool, I'm gonna go check that out. And then you like go to the Thailand pavilion, and like At one point, they're like shooting holograms of dragons into the room, showing you their culture. Then you go to another room that's the entire room, like ceiling, floor, walls, everything is like coated in mirrors, and it like projectors turn on. It's like you're floating in an abyss where like everything around you is moving. It's like, what is this? And then I go to the American pavilion, and they have like a nice little fountain that draws shapes as it's dripping water. And I'm like, U.S. dragon holograms, and you have a fountain that draws shapes. What?
That's kind of a shame. But what was their food?
So the U.S. had two sections. The second section was called Food Truck Nation, and it was just a bunch of food trucks selling hamburgers and hot dogs.
I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. I called it.
There was one point I was there. I also went to another pavilion for Angola. It was one of the biggest pavilions there, which is like some country in Africa, which it was like some like massive science fair going on inside of there. They had, and of course, with it being food, every pavilion had a restaurant. Like I went to the Angola pavilion and like ordered some beef ribs, like cow ribs and stuff with the bone still in. I was like, this is epic. At one point I was like, I want some gyros or kebabs. And I was like, what country might have that?
Greek.
Yeah. Well, actually I went to Turkey, and Turkey had them
at
their pavilion. I was like, sweet.
Pretty close, right? Like geographically, how close? I don't know my geography at all, but I think okay, that's what I thought. Okay. First of all, that's amazing. I'm jealous. Second of all, I'm going to skip a little bit, and I want to hear you tell your story about how what was it, Myanmar, where you got food poisoning?
Yeah.
Tell us that story. First of all, how did you end up in Myanmar? Second of all, how did you get food poisoning? And third, how did that end up playing out in the end?
All right, so the reason I ended up in Myanmar is I ended up teaching a parkour curriculum at this school in China for a few years. And at the school, twice a year, they like to do a teacher's learning workshop. Now, a lot of the people who taught at the school had never really been outside of China. So to help expose the teachers to new and exciting cultures, every year they would do this workshop in a different country. So one of the workshops we went to Myanmar. So we went there, and for those who don't know, Myanmar is also Burma. They're the same country, different names.
Can I ask a question about Myanmar before you continue? What is the government of Myanmar? Like, what system do they use?
I don't really remember what the government system was.
I think I remembered who was that really famous cook that used to go to all the different countries? He passed away.
I'm not sure.
I can't remember his name. Everybody probably knows who I'm talking about, though. I think he went to Myanmar. And I think before you went, could be totally wrong. I don't have Google in front of me because we're in the woods, but I think they were like not letting people into the country from America or like externally for a very long time until recently. Could be very wrong about that.
I do know that as like the name was shifting from Burma to Myanmar, I think I heard like there was a civil war or something in the country. Like there was a lot of conflict. And usually when that kind of stuff, the U.S. likes to blacklist their citizens from going into those countries for it being too dangerous.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well,
but I'm not sure. I do know like when we got off the airport in Myanmar, like the airport was like completely deserted. Like there were tons and tons of stalls where businesses could come and like open up, and they were all deserted. There was like a little convenience store popped up there. And I was like, well, that tells me one thing. This isn't a very good country for businesses if the airport of the capital has like 1,000 empty stalls. I remember looking out and seeing billboards where it was like half the billboards were empty. It was just like, advertise here. And I'm like, no one's advertising at their capital. That means this place isn't getting a lot of traffic. And a lot of people aren't coming in or out of this country.
So, yeah. So I remember seeing a picture of you, I think, with like one of those hats that's
I started
like
collecting some like straw hats in different countries.
And you were walking through a city, like almost like a bazaar, right? There's a picture of that. I'm going to try to find that and put it in this video, like overlay it so that you guys can see what I'm talking about. Also, let me fix this video. Oof. But that picture was really interesting to me because like it looks, having never left the country, that looks like a third world country. Like it really does.
Oh yeah, Myanmar was, I think, pretty much a third world country. One interesting thing with Myanmar is how the cars and the roads worked. So some countries drive on the opposite side of the road as we do in the U.S. Some countries, they drive on the left-hand side of the road. Usually most countries that do, it's either England or a country that England colonized. Those are the ones that drive on the left-hand side of the road. And if they drive on the left-hand side of the road, then they design the cars to where the driver sits on the right side, right?
Yes.
In Myanmar, they drove on the right side of the road, and the driver sat on the right side of the car.
Okay.
So on the outside, which was bizarre to me. So normally the driver...
Right, so it's like having a European car in America.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically.
That would be weird because it doesn't. You want to be closer to the
you want to be closer to the middle so you can see if you're about to hit someone head on. But in Myanmar, it's the only country I've been to where they're driving on the right side of the road with the driver on the right side of the car.
That's an interesting fact. Is that one of those countries that have like triple stacked buses?
I didn't see any. I mean, there were a lot of dirt roads and stuff. Like a lot of the capital was like very low rise buildings.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so how did you end up getting food poisoning?
It's hard to say with all the foods I ate. Could have been the street foods I ate. Could have been that I bought some jerky from a random food stall and the inside of the jerky was still moist, so there could have been bacteria growing in it. Mm-hmm. Which the food, which I do have a video I could send you that you could probably loop into it. So there was this guy I found who was like selling street food, which I absolutely love street food. Anytime I'm in a country and I see street food, I'm like, yes. The only time I didn't grab the street food was in Hong Kong when a lady was selling grilled iguana feet.
That sounds delicious, bro. Why didn't you grab that?
I don't know. She had a little sign. I was like, it's good for your respiratory system. I'm like, maybe,
in what way? Because it'll make you cough so hard that like you clear your lungs out. All right, so
maybe you can like pick your teeth with the toenails of the iguana afterwards. I don't know.
I'm gonna skip that. Yeah, actually, it sounds good because I'm imagining it in my head having this nice crunch, you know.
But yeah, so back to like Myanmar. So there was this dude. He was just sitting, had this table, and the table had like half a pig's head on it. He just had a meat cleaver just sitting there, like cleaving. No, it was just like laying on the table, like on a butcher block, half a pig's head, and he was just like cleaving little cubed pieces off, like cubing a chunk off the nose, cubing a chunk off the ear. And he had these little tiny toothpicks, and you'd go in and be like, oh, I want like 10 pieces of meat. And he would put these little pieces of cubed meat on the sticks, like, and then in the middle of this table, he had like this boiling pot of like black something, just a boiling black liquid.
Black death.
And he would like cleave off some pieces of the pig head, put them on these sticks, take the sticks, swish them around in the pot of boiling black goop, stick them in a bag and hand them to you. And it's just like, cool, thanks.
Did he speak English?
Nope.
So you couldn't ask him what it was?
I just like saw it. I was like, oh yeah. And like, usually you wouldn't be able to communicate to each other. It'd just be like, he would be like, how many you want? You want like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? And I'd be like, I want 10 of them. He's like, cool. All right. X amount of money, like with his fingers, and I would like get the money out, hand it to him. He's like, cool, you're good to go.
So you didn't question the black liquid?
The black liquid I 100% questioned, but I was like, okay, let's do this.
But you didn't question it verbally, you just in your head.
Yeah, I was just like, let's try
You know
this.
how the typical like Disney witch is like stirring a cauldron?
Yeah, that's basically what it looked like.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Well, this man over here decided he would just go ahead and eat it. And that's probably what you got food poisoning from.
And then I like ate some questionable jerky. And I mean, Myanmar was also one of those places we were walking around like in the streets, and there was like this food market. It was a meat market. We're walking around on dirt, out in the sun. People have like chunks of like slabs of meat hung up on meat hooks out in the sun with like flies flying around it.
Classic.
And I'm just like, this definitely doesn't look sanitary, but
I'll take 3.
I didn't buy anything from there.
Oh, good. Actually, you might have been better off.
Well, another thing that could have gave me the food poisoning, because it didn't hit me when I was in Myanmar. So we got on the plane to head back to Beijing, and we had a layover in some city. And I was like, oh, I'm hungry. I'm going to go like get something from a food stall here in the airport. And it came with a duck egg. It was like a boiled duck egg, and the middle of the egg had the yolk had a custard consistency. And in Asia, sometimes they'll give you eggs that have been expired for months if you're not careful.
Well, tell me how the experience was of being food poisoned and like what you did during that time.
Well, I got on the plane, head from that place, heading back to Beijing, and I was in the front. I was in the first. I was like, yo, this is like being in first class. Heck yeah. Because they like bumped up where I was sitting, and like halfway through, I was like, something's up with my stomach.
Mm-hmm. Did it creep up, or was it instantly like, was it nausea or pain?
It like started creeping up. It was more like a nausea.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to the lavatory in the airplane a few times during the flight, and then we finally got back, and then eventually stuff started coming out of both ends, and I was like laid up in bed like, oh, like this feels horrible. Like I need to like be in a place where I can really quickly run to the bathroom for whenever something starts to come up or come out.
Did you tell the flight attendants like, hey, I am experiencing potentially food poisoning?
No, I was just sitting there like flying back. It's like, oh, this is gonna be a nice chill flight, and then like halfway I'm like, something ain't right. And then after I had it for 2 or 3 days, my roommate who went with me to Myanmar started experiencing it. And he ate all the foods I ate except for that duck egg.
So it wasn't the duck egg.
So it may not have been the duck egg. However, considering it hit me a lot faster, the duck egg probably didn't help it at all.
Yeah.
And I think I ate more of the jerky. The jerky, it was concerning to me because it was like these like thick pieces of dried meat, but in the center of it, it was still moist. I'm like, don't think that's the way jerky.
It wasn't fully dehydrated. Yeah. Yeah, it sounds to me like it wasn't fully dehydrated. Okay, so you're on an airplane, you start feeling nausea, you start experiencing what you probably are assuming at this point is food poisoning because you have common sense and you just remembered, oh, I just ate a bunch of random weird food in a third world country. I wonder, yeah, so that's what the effects are. When you get to the, when you land, how severe are you feeling? Do you feel like you need to go to the hospital? Or I
never felt like I needed to go to the hospital, but like being in China, they're like, oh, here are these herbs, drink this tea, do this. I was like, all right, which I was better probably in about 3 or 4 days. But then it took me probably like 1 or 2 weeks to get my appetite back to where it was. It's kind of like I've told some people like, I've also had COVID, and I would equate food poisoning to COVID, like having full-blown COVID to where like one of my symptoms was like coughing up blood when I had COVID. Like it was equal to food poisoning, except with COVID, it didn't feel as bad as food poisoning. COVID lasted like 2 weeks. Food poisoning was like all 2 weeks of stuff compacted into like 3 or 4 days. It was like way worse than COVID, but it only lasted for like 3 days.
Yeah, I will say that I have had a stomach virus, which is basically, depending on the stomach virus, as severe as food poisoning, but even less time than food poisoning. Food poisoning can last like 3 days to a week. Stomach viruses are usually good and gone by like 24, 48 hours. But during that 24 hours, you're in severe pain. You can't eat, you're dehydrated because all of your fluids are gone. It's horrible. Your body's aching. You got a fever and you're freezing at the same time. It's not good. But that kind of makes me want to also bring up the fact that you said you had COVID. So if I'm not mistaken, and we're not going to get too deep into COVID and vaccines and everything because I have no opinion on any of this, just want to talk about the experience. You had COVID. You were sick for quite a while. You recovered. Later on, you decided to get vaccinated. So you got 2 vaccines. You got the full course. And then not that long afterwards, you ended up getting COVID again.
Yeah.
We don't want to go too much into detail on the second time because we're going to talk about the accident and we'll get to that. But can you tell me your experience with COVID the first time and then your experience with COVID the second time and how they differ?
Yeah, so COVID the first time, what first gave me a hint that I may have had it is my lungs started burning, which I didn't think too much of it because like living in China for 3 years, air pollution is really, really bad in China to the point where like if you walk outside and you don't have a mask on, your lungs are going to start burning. You're going to start getting nauseated. You're going to start getting dizzy from the pollution you're breathing in. That's why when COVID hit here, people are like, oh, the mask. I'm like, bro, just throw a mask on. Like, at least like you're not like breathing in death when you walk outside. Like
privileged.
Yeah. But like my lungs started burning again. And I was like, yo, like, and by this point, because I got back into the U.S. from China in 2020, I got COVID April of 2021, so I know I didn't get it in China, and I'd been out of China for a year and a half, so I knew it wasn't pollution or anything in my lungs, but I was like, yo, it feels like I'm my lungs are burning as if I'm breathing in like some heavy levels of air pollution. And I know I'm in the US. I know it's not air pollution. And then the next day the burning was worse. And I like called my bosses where I work. Like, hey guys, like my lungs are burning. I might have COVID. Do you guys want me to come in? They're like, well, if you don't have a fever, you're good. So like, come on in. Cause I was sitting out in the car. I was like, y'all sure you want me to come in? Cause I may have COVID right now. And then I go in and they're like, yeah, let's check your temp. And my boss like freaks out. I'm like, why? What's up? Cause I'm like feeling good. My lungs are just burning. But like I said, from being in China, I'm like used to that feeling. And I was like, what does it say? And my other manager tempts me and his eyes freak out. I'm like, what's up, guys? They're like, you have a fever of 103 right now. I'm like, all right, see you guys. I'm going to get tested. And I had COVID. And then like from there, the symptoms started getting worse. Probably 3 days after that is when I like lost my sense of taste, lost my sense of smell. When I got COVID, I weighed like 182 pounds. And I remember going into it, I was like, all right, like if I want to heal quickly, I need to make sure that like I'm eating healthy and all this stuff. So I like got a little Walmart thing where I could go pick it up from the store, or they would just like drop it in my car for me. I like got salmon, veggies. I like got everything I needed to make lentil soup for the next 2 weeks. Like I got all the stuff I needed to like be healthy and like have a good solid meal. And I remember like cooking up my lentil soup and stuff, and like it took me an hour to eat half a bowl of soup because like my appetite was like completely gone. And I'm like sitting there like force feeding myself lentils. I was like, well, I got to eat the salmon that I got. I don't want that to go back because that's expensive. But it was like ended up to where like for the next 2 weeks, like force feeding myself. Like I said, I was like 182 pounds when this went in. And at this point, I think I was already like at the single digits for my body fat. But then I was like, what was it? Like I went down from 182 to like 167 for my weight. Wow.
So you almost lost 20 pounds. You lost about 15 pounds.
Which the bad part about that is back in January, I was like, you know what? Like I want to lose some weight. I'm 200 pounds. I want to get down to 180. So I started trying to lose weight. I went from 200 pounds down to 180 pounds. Mm-hmm. So I was like, or 182. I was like, yeah, I'm almost at my weight goal. Then I get hit with COVID and go down to 167 pounds. Mm-hmm. So essentially I dropped almost 35 pounds. And I already wasn't a big guy. I was just like, I do a lot of very high impact sports like parkour. I want to weigh less, so it's less impact on my joints. And I was like, if I go down to 180, I should be around 9% body fat. And then I get down to that point, and then I lose 13 more pounds. And I'm like, man, I just got COVID shredded.
Yeah. If you want to call it that. So did you feel like really exhausted?
Yeah, I did feel like really exhausted. Like I said, I didn't realize it at first, but I was coughing up blood. Like for example, if you're coughing up infection, you're going to be coughing up green or yellow. I was coughing up brown. Mm-hmm. And at first I didn't think anything of it. And after like a week, I was like, what does it mean if you're coughing up brown fluid? And I like Googled it. It's like, if you're coughing up brown stuff, it's dried blood that you're coughing up. I was like, oh, I've been coughing up like dried blood from my lungs, which I think the reason that may have happened is from me being in China for 3 years. There's reports you can read, like people who live in China, especially like the bigger cities, for an extended period of time. It takes like years off of your life expectancy because of the air pollution. Like one of my friends was sending me articles who got me the job in Beijing. He's like, hey, just in case this matters to you, it's probably going to take 5 years off of your lifespan from you breathing in the air pollution over there. Which you saw me that time we met up in LA, like for a solid week. I was like
coughing and
I was like coughing up like phlegm and stuff from my lungs, like clearing the pollution out of my lungs my first week back in the US.
Yeah. So, we're going to talk about we're going to talk about the LA trip in just a minute, but I want to ask you.
Yeah, I'm just bringing that up because I think like.
No, I'm just saying like we are going to, but now I want to ask you, how was your second time with COVID without giving
second time with COVID? Like I didn't even know I had COVID. I was just like, had what felt like a normal seasonal bug, wasn't thinking anything of it. The accident that we're going to talk about happened, and I found out like, oh yeah. I was like in the hospital, and they're like, oh yeah, you've got COVID. You can't have visitors because you got COVID. I'm like, I got what? They're like, oh, you got COVID. I'm like, I don't feel like I have COVID. I've had it before. This doesn't feel like COVID. This feels like a normal seasonal bug.
Yeah, but I guess probably having COVID before and then having 2 shots of the vaccine,
Yeah, not to mention I ended up mixing vaccines, so I got a Moderna shot and a Pfizer shot. So there are studies saying that all Moderna is better, but I've seen some stuff that says mixing potentially gives you benefits of both.
Who knows?
So who knows?
Yeah. All right, so that is absolutely wild. It sounds like basically like a pretty severe illness the first time around, and then the second time it was just like, So probably if you get it every year, it'll be kind of like the seasonal cold.
Yeah, plus like the first time I got it, that was when like COVID was like really starting to hit hard. It was apparently when it was the worst strain, and when I got it the second time was when
the Omicron.
Omicron, yeah, I think it was probably more or less Omicron that I probably had the second time around.
Yeah, most likely.
It was about like, it wasn't even as bad as having a cold.
It was just like a scratchy throat allergy type of thing.
Yeah, they were just like, yeah, you got COVID. I'm like, really? Thought this was just like allergies.
Well, that's good at least. Okay, so now there's 2 more topics I kind of want to run over, and I think I'm going to save the accident for last. So let's talk about some of our travels, which is going to bring me to some of my travels. I moved to Colorado for a couple years. I'm originally from Colorado. I was born in Colorado, and I moved there in 2017 because I was like, I wanted to be a software engineer, but where I lived here in Columbus, there was no software engineering jobs. So I literally ditched everything I had, drove my car that was literally falling apart to Colorado and lived on my grandpa's floor, and then I lived on my uncle's couch for about 6 months and eventually found a job on Reddit and just made a life for myself out there. And once I finally established a foundation, I managed to find that I really loved being out in the mountains and hiking and adventuring, and I really kind of just like started to get back into that adventure mindset after having been disciplined for so long. And so Chris over here, he's coming from out of the country, and it turns out he's going to be coming into LAX. And I'm like, I've always wanted to go to California. I'm just going to drive there and pick him up. And he's like, yeah, it sounds good. We're going to do this. So I had a friend who lived in Los Angeles at the time, where she now lives back in town. But
and I had an old roommate from Georgia who lived in Los Angeles.
Perfect, too. And so I go there, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to get there the day before Chris shows up. I'm going to crash at my friend's house. He's going to crash at his friend's house, and then we're going to meet up the next morning. And so I'm driving from Colorado Springs up through Denver, through the most beautiful, probably the most beautiful part of the entire country. Going from Colorado to Los Angeles, you end up going through like Vegas and stuff like that, which we'll get to. And I pick him up from LA. We spend the whole day there. We watch the Dragon Ball Z movie in the theater. We get stuck in traffic and have good conversations with Uber drivers. We go to this rooftop bar. We talk to homeless people. It was awesome.
Bar that had a swimming pool.
It had a swimming pool, which we did not get into, unfortunately. It was a little chilly. I think it was February. Chilly for LA in February is like 70. And yeah, we went to the beach, Muscle Beach. We did everything you would want to do in Los Angeles in like 12 hours. And yeah, I mean, we hit the subways. We did everything. We went to the mall. And we're like, you know what? Let's get out of here. So we're heading back to Colorado. And we decide to take a stop in Las Vegas. You know, why not? We're here. And we end up finding out that because it's in February, the prices for everything is really low because it's not tourist season. So I end up finding like a suite in the Rio, which would probably normally be like $2,000-$3,000 a night.
Maybe.
For like $200 a night.
I think we got it for like $50 a night, didn't we?
No, it ended up being more than that. I can't remember exactly what the price was, but it might have been less than 100. But we end up there, and then we're like, since we're at the Rio,
so they know, like, yeah, the Rio's where Penn and Teller happen to perform. That's their hotel.
Exactly. That's their performance hotel.
Mm-hmm.
So we go see Penn and Teller. Randomly, we're just like, let's go see Penn and Teller. And while we're there, we actually managed to take selfies with Penn Jillette. Mm-hmm. And by the way, we ended up on stage on some of the acts, and that was an awesome experience. Fun. That was a good time. And then yeah, I don't know. That whole experience was like, it's just cool to be able to like randomly have a friend that's coming from out of the country and be like, all right, let's have a random road trip. And then on that road trip, we do everything you can possibly do in LA in 12 hours and then stay the night in Las Vegas and experience that. It's kind of like with that
and
one
then
time.
Also, like, we decided we're like, you know what? We have like almost no money on us, but we can't leave Vegas without gambling. So I had like a $10 bill and I like went over and like got a $10 token. I was like, all right, I'm going to go do the blackjack table. I'm like sitting down. And for the record, like all my experience in blackjack is literally hitting the blackjack table and Grand Theft Auto San Andreas.
Well, there you go.
And I like sit down.
Foreshadowing here.
Put my coin down. I was like, all right, I'm going to go back to my tactics from Grand Theft Auto. Ended up winning. I was like, yeah, I won. I was like, all right, I'm going to quit while I'm down. They're like, you don't want to play again? I was like, no. I've played one game of poker or blackjack in Vegas, and I currently have a 100% winning streak. This is a good time to stop.
So you could just leave it there.
You're like, I
have a
doubled my
100% winning
money,
streak.
and I like gave the extra token or poker chip that I won to like Zach so he could go play. He sat down, was like, all right, I'm going to do some blackjack. And he lost it all.
Lost it all in one round. I mean, to be fair, I didn't understand that there was hand gestures, and I didn't play Grand Theft Auto. Well, I did, but not that part. And so I'm just like, what am I supposed to do? Hit me. And he's like, no, you do this or something. You do this thing with your hand. And I'm like, and then he told me the other thing I was supposed to do with my hand, and I got them mixed up, and it was not good.
Yeah, what I did
awkward.
When I won is like the big thing I took from Grand Theft Auto is like the statistics of like what are your odds of winning at different numbers. So I think like I got, and they like gave me a 16, and I was like, wait a minute, from what I remember from Grand Theft Auto, if you have a 16 or higher, you have above like a 50% chance of winning. However, if you like hit to try to get another car, because most people get around a 16 and they're like, man, I'm nowhere near a 20, like I need more stuff. But if you hit at a 16, you have like over a 60% chance of busting and losing. So I was like, I had a 16, I was like, I'm gonna stay. And then the dealer was like, that's all right, well I have to keep drawing until I beat this guy. And he ended up busting on hit, like trying to like get more than a 16.
Yeah.
So I won. I was like, yeah.
And that's how you do it, folks. Next time you go to Vegas, use the Chris Selle method. All right. So going into our final topic here, that was a road trip that we did. And we kind of like, we're like road trip buddies at this point. You know, like whenever we get the opportunity to, we take trips to random spots. And one of the spots that we took most recently was a trip up into Tennessee called the Dragon. And I think it was in Tennessee, but it's like on the border of Tennessee and South Carolina or something like that, North Carolina. One of the Carolinas. It's on the border of Tennessee and one of the Carolinas. And so we drive up from my house in Atlanta up north, and on the way, and he's on a motorcycle, I'm in a car, and we're going to this place.
He's on his car.
I was on top of my car surfing, and yeah. Anyway, no. So we end up going to this huge apple orchard, which if you're ever in North Georgia, it's called Mercier's. You need to check it out. And so we end up getting to Tennessee where the Dragon is, which I'll explain what that is in a second. And we're getting into the city where the Dragon is located. And we end up like camping in this weird kind of campsite that's dedicated to the Dragon. And the next morning we go into town to get some breakfast. And the entire, I'm not joking, the entire city's power went out. And I think we saw the culprit, which was like a power cable that was hanging out off the road. A tree had fallen on top of it. And I think that put the entire city's power out. Very small town.
Just so you know, like Robinsonville, which is where this is the poorest county in South Carolina.
That I did not know, but I could tell. Especially if the entire city's power relies on one line.
North Carolina.
Yeah, I think it was North Carolina and Tennessee border.
Yeah.
Because believe it or not, North Carolina, part of it is
touching Georgia, which means
south of South Carolina. Because the corner of it is more south than South Carolina.
Which means if North Carolina can touch Georgia, then it's blocking South Carolina from getting to Tennessee.
Yep. So the Dragon, it's this really, really, really insanely dangerous road that people like to come from all over the country to visit on their motorcycles. It's like a legendary spot for anybody who drives like Harleys or those types of things, or really any type of hot rod, to just go there and like have a good time and drive down this, I think it's like 17-mile road with hundreds of curves. It's extremely dangerous. It's extremely awesome, though. Very beautiful. It's a trip that I would say I do not recommend anybody take because I don't want a lawsuit. But if I were me, I would do it again.
Yeah, it's like it's a very windy road on the side of a mountain. For example, like semis, 18-wheelers are banned from driving down it. However, sometimes they try it. And there's one of the gift shops has photos of 18-wheelers with their trailers hanging off the side of the mountain because they decided they were going to try to drive down this road, and then their trailer went off the side of a mountain.
And just to also talk about the danger of this thing, there's a tree at the gift shop kind of area where basically like it's a memorial of many people who have died, and all their motorcycle parts that they managed to like find off the ditch and on the side of the road, they put on the tree.
Yeah, they call it the tree of shame. I think there's some people, like, you don't necessarily have to die, but like anyone who wrecks on their motorcycle might take a piece of it and just like stick it on this tree.
And so I'm going to include a picture of that in this clip so you can see it. And you can see it's pretty grim. This is before you actually start the dragon. So you're looking at this and you're like, okay, so this is what we're about to do. Here we go. And so Chris, he's a Harley driver and he wanted to take this trip. So he's on his Harley.
For the record, when we decided to do this trip, I still had my temporary motorcycle license because I had taken my test to get licensed on the motorcycle a week before this.
So definitely not sketchy. I totally don't recommend this, but again, if I were us, I would do it again. I drive behind Chris because I wanted to make sure that nobody was like an asshole and was driving up behind Chris and like trying to pass him or, getting too close to him. So I was going to drive behind Chris in my car and give him enough space to be safe or whatever while he did his thing. And I almost flew off the freaking road because it is really dangerous, and having a front-wheel drive Honda Accord on that was not a good idea.
Yeah, it's like anyone who drives, like, every now and then you'll see signs where it's like, oh, here comes a turn, 35 mile an hour recommended speed for these turns. Usually when you see those signs, they're just like nice recommendations. I know for me personally, like most of the time I see a 35 mile an hour sign, it's like, oh, okay, so it's safe for me to hit this thing probably around 45 or 50. On the Dragon, they had those signs saying, we recommend that you go 15 miles an hour around these turns. And these were serious recommendations. If you were going faster than 15 miles an hour, for me on my bike, the underside of my bike would be scrubbing the asphalt. Like, I checked the bottom half of my bike. I was missing half of a bolt because it had grinded off on the asphalt.
One way to kind of explain how some of these curves are is like you're coming down, and then the curve will be like this. Let me switch angles.
Yeah, because you're going up, down, hairpin turns while you're going up and down the whole way.
So if you can imagine going downhill like this, and then the curve goes uphill. It's kind of hard to explain.
Yeah,
but
some of these hairpin turns, if you go off the road, you're going to go flying into the side of a mountain. Other ones, if you go off the road, you're going to be flying off the mountain.
Yeah, but just generally the physics of it is extremely dangerous. So I know that I took a turn going 20 or 25, and I almost flew off of the road. So that's some perspective. But anyway,
yeah, on my bike, to give you an idea, I never left second gear going through this thing, and my bike shifts into second gear at like 20 miles an hour. And I most of the time was between first and second gear.
Yeah. But the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because motorcycles and dangerousness. Recently,
they're a little dangerous.
They're a little dangerous. Unfortunately, I personally know, and Chris personally knows, several people have died on motorcycles, and now I have one more person who's close to me who almost died on a motorcycle, and he's going to tell his story about how that happened. So, Chris, I'm going to ask you to start off by telling us how the accident happened, and then kind of explain what was happening while you were waiting for the ambulance to get there. Explain what happens once you got to the hospital, and kind of how your healing progress has been. Take it away, buddy.
All right, so I was living I was in Birmingham, Alabama. At the time that this wreck happened, my motorcycle was my primary transport. I had a van that I was renovating, but like the van kept breaking down. Like literally I just got out of the shop and it stopped running 2 days later. So my bike was my only means of transport. I say that because I'm getting on my bike, about to head to work, It had heavily snowed in Birmingham the day before. He could probably link a picture that I took of my bike the night before where like there's a blizzard coming down, like snow everywhere. So I'm like on the bike. It's probably 8:30 in the morning, heading to work. There's this little like T-junction in the road. And like I said, sides of the road covered in snow still from the snowstorm. And there's this lady I see. She's like sitting there, stopped, getting ready to turn. I'm not worried too much about her because I can tell that she stopped. And right as I'm going through this little T-junction, she decides to go. My best guess is she was probably watching the person behind me, the SUV that was following me, and not me myself. And as she decides to go, she ends up T-boning me, like straight into the side of my bike. And I see her coming. At this point, I'm going 35, maybe 40 miles an hour, too fast to dodge. If I were to slam on brakes, my back wheels would have skidded out from under me and I would have hit the side of her car. And anyone on a motorcycle, you know, if you're going over like 40 and up, you don't want to hit somebody. That's how you break your neck, hitting the side of their car. But I ended up trying to like swerve out. I was hoping that she would slam on brakes, see me, and then I could like swerve back into the road before I went flying off the road. But she hit me, kept pushing me, flew off the bike. At this point, I'm going airborne, and I see that I'm about to hit this snow-covered embankment. I don't even remember how I came off the bike. I just remember her hitting me, flying through the air, seeing the snow-covered embankment, hitting the snow, put my arms out into a power slide. From us doing parkour, like there's a lot of like parkour really trains your reflexes. So when stuff like this happens, all you're focused on is like, all right, I'm in the air. Primary goal, got to land safely. And then when I hit the ground, I started power sliding. Still, my mind was in the avenue of like, all right, I'm now sliding on the snow. I've got to make sure I stop safely. And I saw that I was like sliding towards a tree. In my brain, I was already thinking like, all right, if I get to this tree and I haven't stopped yet, I've got to pick up my foot that I'm like leading my power slide with and stomp this tree with it to stop myself. Luckily, I ended up stopping like 2 or 3 feet before the tree, so I didn't have to like forcefully stop myself on this thing. And by the time I stopped, I screamed a couple times because something in my body hurt. Wasn't sure what. And I kind of like refocused myself and was like, all right, how's my body feel? And I was like, oh, my left leg feels a little weird. What's up with my left leg? So I pick up my leg and kind of lean my knee over my other leg so I could like look at my leg to see what was wrong. And I saw a slab of red meat with bones sticking out of it with my foot on the end of it dangling from my knee. I'm like, all right, that doesn't look good.
Yeah.
That doesn't look nice. And I was like, this is bad enough. And in my brain, I thought of like where I'd like heard of people like breaking bones and like they saw their bones sticking out of their leg. I was like this isn't sticking out of my leg. Like this is my entire leg filleted open.
So at this point, are you thinking like there's a possibility you could die?
I'm not thinking about dying, but I'm definitely looking at my leg. I'm like, I could lose my leg. Like this is instantly, I was like, this is serious enough that I may lose my leg.
So were you thinking clearly enough to actually, were you in shock or were you able to actually think clearly?
I don't think I was in shock. I was thinking clearly because as soon as I saw my leg, I was like, okay, I don't need to look at this anymore. So like, because also with me, like seeing gore doesn't really, mentally, it doesn't bother me. Mm-hmm. However, I can like I do have a tendency, like if I see someone who's hurt, I might actually black out. Like I'll start in my mind thinking of like, oh man, what does that feel like? And I have like had times where like I almost blacked out from like seeing someone hurt.
Okay.
Like I said, when I look at someone, my thought process is like, oh, I really want to help them. However, I can't help them because something in my brain's making me black out right now from looking at this. So I like put my leg back down. I was like, all right, I can't look at that. And I started screaming. I was like, call 911. Because at this point I was like, I need help. Like someone get 911. And instantly I heard like 3 people up the hill that I just slid down yelling back to me, we're calling 911.
So you might have already mentioned this, but is this in like a city? Is this in a very populated?
This was in Birmingham. I don't know if anyone knows about Oak Mountain State Park. It wasn't in the city. It was kind of on the outskirts.
Interesting. So
are you in the greater Birmingham area, closer to a city called Hoover, which is kind of part of Birmingham?
Would you say that you're lucky that there was a bunch of people around, or is that normal?
I would definitely say that, well, on this particular road, it would have been normal because there are also a ton of schools on this road. So this time of day, there are a lot of people driving to the schools to drop their kids off.
Okay, cool. So I'm just trying to gauge this situation.
And this was
in my head.
also 8:30 in the morning, so there was a lot of work traffic, like people taking their kids to school, people going to work. Like this particular road, there's schools and people's houses. Like the lady who hit me, she was turning to go into a major subdivision where like tons of houses back in there where probably hundreds of people lived. So this is an area like this particular time of day, like this road is like super congested. But like as soon as like I looked at my leg, I was like, oh, call 911. And like I said, I heard up the hill like multiple people scream back down, we're calling 911. And this lady came running down the hill and I saw her. I was like, oh, are you the one who hit me? She's like, no. I was like, oh, where is she? She's like, oh, the person who hit me like kept driving into the subdivision.
Oh my God.
Which she was on the police report. So
Wow.
she obviously came back to tell the police her side of the story.
Okay.
Which according to her side of the story, she never moved and I hit her head on. That's what the police report said. However, all the witnesses on the police report were like, no, she T-boned this guy. That's what all witnesses said.
So that's the official verdict.
The official police report is she said I hit her and all witnesses said that she T-boned me.
Okay.
But I asked the lady, like, oh, how does my leg look? She's like, there's a lot of blood coming out of your leg. So instantly I was like, oh, I need a tourniquet this thing. So I started screaming like, I need a tourniquet. And then she even like started screaming on back the hill like, he wants a tourniquet on his left leg. And there was a guy there who I think he was off-duty cop, maybe off-duty EMT, had a tourniquet in his like first aid bag in his car. So he grabbed it, came running down, slapped it on my leg. He's like, all right, man, this is about to hurt like a son of a bitch. And I was like, all right. And he like, I remember he threw it on. And I was like, oh crap, take it off. Because the tourniquet at this point hurt worse than my leg. He's like, no, you need this on my leg. I'm like, you're right. I need this on my leg. So he put it on. And about probably a minute later is when a police officer showed up. Turns out he wasn't even called to the scene. He was just driving down the road and then saw a bunch of people jump out of cars and was like, wait, what's happening? All right, blue lights on. It's go time. And then the ambulance who picked me up actually came from a fire station that was a mile down the road from me.
Hold on, let me stop you there. The guy that tourniqueted your leg, are you still in contact with him?
No. He might be one of the witnesses. I'm assuming it was probably that lady and him who were the eyewitnesses on the police report, but I never called those numbers to find out.
I'm just thinking about the fact that you were in a situation where you knew you needed a tourniquet. He knew you needed a tourniquet. He starts to put the tourniquet on. You're like, no, it hurts. You want him to stop.
Oh,
but here's the thing, is he knew not to stop. So that fact alone, because you could have, I think if it weren't for that guy, you might have lost your leg, bro. Right? So that's an interesting, it's an interesting person, I think. And
I still have the tourniquet.
Nice. That's an interesting guy. I'd like to meet him sometime, but continue.
But yeah, so then the ambulance was called. I don't know if it was through 911 the ambulance was called or if it was the police officer who rode up. He could have jumped on the radio and called up the road and be like, hey, we need you guys to get here now. Because the ambulance was on the scene probably within 10 minutes of the wreck happening. The guy, I think, had the tourniquet on within 2 to 3 minutes, and then probably 8 minutes after that is when the ambulance showed up. And I remember they came, had like one of those super hard boards because, you know, they're like walking down the snow-covered embankment. Pulled me on. They're like, all right, this is going to hurt. I'm like, and they're like, get me on. Oof. Still had my helmet on. Got me in the ambulance, and like we were on the way, and I was talking to them. I was like, guys, how's my leg look? Like, what are the odds you think probably me losing it? And they're like, well, we're not the people who can give that call, but your leg is not looking too good. And I was like, because I was also on the way to work. I had just got some raises, and they were talking to me about some promotions at work the day before the wreck happened. I was like, hey, could you like call my job and like let them know that I'm not going to be coming in today? I could like hear him on the phone talking to my manager like, hey, this is the paramedic so-and-so. I've got so-and-so on the way to the hospital. This is happening. And I remember talking to that manager afterwards on the phone. He's like, yo, this is a lot worse than that EMT made it sound. Yeah.
He hurt his leg. We're bringing him into the ER. Meanwhile, I've seen the pictures, folks. I'm not going to put them on the video because of people that might be squeamish, but let me tell you, it's some of the worst gore I've ever seen. This man's leg was not doing good. I'm going to put a couple pictures on there of what your leg looks like now.
Yeah. Which
But
even the way it looks like now, it's a little much for some people.
Yeah, if you depending on where you're at, someone might
I've
lose
only
their
had
appetite.
one person so far who's like, I can't look at your leg. Other people are just like, that looks rough.
It looks rough, but it just looks like severe burns. Like if you've seen somebody with very severe burns, it's about that level now. And I think that it looks like it's going to heal pretty good. So you're in the hospital. They don't want you to go unconscious because if you do, that might not be good for...
Yeah, that might not be good because, as soon as this happens, they want you to stay alert just so they can, maintain, they know that you're doing good. They know you're not going into shock or anything. So, from the second the wreck happened, getting loaded on the ambulance, going to the hospital, through the whole thing, I was conscious through all of it. And I remember also the EMT was like, yeah, dude, you're on the way to one of the best trauma centers in the Southeast. So if you want to keep your leg, this is probably the best place to be going right now. I was like, all right, sweet, let's go. And then I get in, and as soon as I get to the hospital, it's like a team of nurses just tackles me. They're just all around, all right, get this, get his finals, do this thing. They're like, all right, here's the shot. All right, we got this paperwork signed here. Are you okay if we need to give you blood transfusion? I'm like, yeah, all right, check. And then got me back. One dude was measuring my other leg. Turns out they had to put this X-fix on my leg. It was an external skeleton to hold it in place while they were figuring out what to do with it. And I remember they CT scanned me, and they came back. All right. So his hip's dislocated. Obviously the guy's leg's broken. 3 of his toes are broken, and all this other stuff. And they're like, all right, we got to get his hip back in socket ASAP, which I found out from my orthopedic surgeon. Fun tip, if you ever know someone who dislocates their hip, so there's the ball joint in your hip, right? It's called the femoral head, and there's a blood artery that goes into it. When your hip gets dislocated, you've got about 6 hours to relocate it before there's a chance of that blood vessel dying. And if that blood vessel dies, then eventually the bone is going to die and you're going to need a hip replacement. However, in the CT scans and all that, they can't see if that's been severed. They will only know if my blood vessel was severed if my femoral... The wind getting into the mic.
Part of the fun of being... Oh, there's literally a stick on the camera. Keep talking. Keep talking. And I'll go get that.
But yeah, so I found out that the only way of them knowing if that blood vessel in my hip has been severed is if suddenly they start seeing my bone starting to die from no blood supply. But the surgeon was like, yeah, as long as we can get it back in socket within 6 hours, it drastically reduces the chance of that blood vessel being severed. He even told me that in his career as an orthopedic surgeon, he has only ever seen one person that blood vessel died who got their hip back into socket within 6 hours. So if you ever know someone and you're like, yo, his hip might be out of socket, you've got 6 hours to get this guy to the hospital and have them pull it back into place before he is going to be in some major issues.
Well, I would say that you are pretty lucky that you got there in time.
Yeah, that I got there so quick. But I remember they're like, all right, we're going to have to pull your hip back into socket. To do that, we're going to have to put a metal pin through your knee and use that metal pin to pull your hip back into socket. And I'm like, all right. And then a surgeon comes up, they wheel me into the operating room. The surgeon's like, so, are you familiar with what ketamine is? And for me, guys, I've never done drugs. I've seen a ton of programs on it, but I looked at it and was like, ketamine, I've heard of it. Why? He's like, well, this is what we're going to give you to put you under. He's like, we're deciding to give this to you because you've been super positive the whole way in, with everything that's been going on. So we think it'll work well for you. And he even was like, people who aren't in a good mood do not have a fun time on ketamine. Mm-hmm. He's like, when we give it to you, just think of the best place in the world and it's going to take you there. I was like, all right. And they were getting set up, and then I had an IV in, and they hooked a thing into the IV. They're like, all right, here comes the ketamine. And injected it. Next thing I know, I'm seeing fuzzy stuff. My ears start ringing in a super high pitched noise, and I just go out. And I don't really remember any hallucinations on the ketamine. I just remember at some point I start regaining a little bit of consciousness of what's happening around me during the surgery, or to put the metal pin in my knee. And I hear a power drill fire up. And next thing I know, I can feel the power drill going through my knee. And it didn't hurt or anything. I just felt the pressure, and I could feel the pressure of it pushing through my skin on the other side, and then the tension of my skin releasing as the drill bit finally went through it.
Oh no.
And I opened my mouth. I was like, hey, did I just hear a power drill go through my knee. And the surgeon's like, nope, that wasn't a power drill. That's just the ketamine talking. That nothing's happening. And I hear some other dude chime in, and there's like, yep, it's Black & Decker.
Straight out of Home Depot.
I was like, man, guys, you couldn't at least use a DeWalt on me or something?
So you're telling me that you woke up in the middle of your ketamine trip and felt the drill going through, and then they started making jokes. Yeah. You know, actually, that's actually good, because I feel like a lot of surgeons probably wouldn't know how to react in that situation, because they don't want you to freak out, because you're in the middle of surgery. And if you say, yeah, we're drilling through your leg, a normal person might be like, oh no, you know, and freak out. But you're just like, huh. So that's what that feels like.
Yeah, it's just like, guys, did I just hear a power drill go through my leg? They're like, oh, no, you're just tripping on ketamine, bro.
So your ketamine experience was mostly a blur at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that was the biggest thing I remember from it. I do definitely remember like my ears ringing and everything as I was like going into the trip after they gave it to me. And then later on, before they like hook something else up into my IV, you know, they have to flush your IV. And the doctor's like, hey, heads up, I'm about to flush your IV. You might still have a little bit of ketamine in there, so you might feel something when I flush it. I was like, all right. Which I heard like a faint ringing, but it wasn't like when they like gave me the full hit of it.
So you probably got like a way higher dose than what would be considered a clinical dose for people who go in for mental health or people that are just trying to do it recreationally.
Oh yeah, because like I looked up ketamine after this, and it turns out some hospitals do use it as anesthesia for like minor surgeries, but it's more for like, so normal anesthesia
therapy.
From what I looked up, it like stops your breathing and they have to hook you up to a respirator. With ketamine, it doesn't stop your respiratory system. So they can hit you with ketamine, put you under like an anesthesia, but you're still able to breathe freely and that kind of stuff. So like, for example, my situation, they're like, oh, we've got to relocate this guy's hip ASAP. So it was a good thing for them to be able to just like give it to me, put me under, and like get the surgery done as quickly as possible.
Interesting. So would you say, and this could be getting towards the more controversial side, but you were in a very bad situation, so I'm going to ask it anyway because this excuses it, you know. Was it fun?
I mean, I would say so. I mean, I wouldn't like go back and do it again because, you know, if you're doing ketamine on the street, like it's a tranquilizer. My grandfather died of like opioid overdose. Like as for that reason, I've never really done pain meds. Even like if I have like a headache, I'm like, I'm just going to deal with this stuff. I'm not going to take Tylenol. I call them bitch pills. I was like, I'm not going to take that for this stuff. I almost broke my ankle one time and like never took pain meds. I was like, I'm just going to walk this thing off.
Well, you also have a pain tolerance like no one else I know. There's something wrong
some
with
of my
bro.
nurses now have been like when I was in the hospital, I had some nurses like, dude, do you need help? Like they would open my doors like, do you need help? I was like, no. Why? I was like, you're not hitting your call button to ask for help. I'm like, do other people do? They're like, yeah, other people are hitting that call button nonstop wanting pain meds. Like, you've never once asked for pain meds.
You know, it's kind of creepy that he said that because, like, what's his deal? Like, is he wanting to give you pain meds? Just leave you alone.
Well, they're just like, hey, bro, are you good? I'm like, yeah, why? They're like, well, you're not hitting your call button and asking for help. Like,
I think they were hinting at it, you, bro. They were like, bro, want to make a little money on the side? All right, so that is probably where we're going to end this. I'd love to have you on again. There's so many stories that Chris has and that we have together, and that there's just so many things that we're probably going to do in the future too. We didn't even talk about a lot of the other things we
didn't
did,
even talk about that they also gave me fentanyl in the hospital.
Well, that makes sense because it is a pain medication. But we're going to stop this here because my laptop is about to overheat and melt. And we're sitting out here and the sun is like beating down onto the laptop. I'm surprised it didn't break down so far, but keep an eye out for the next time that Chris is on. Is there anywhere in particular that you want people to follow you? Maybe Instagram? Is that your choice right now?
Yeah, right now my big thing is Instagram, called The Wandering Chris.
I'll put a link in the YouTube description or Facebook, depending on where you're watching this. The Wandering Chris, underscores between each word, and make sure to follow him.
Recently I've only been doing probably like monthly posts.
Yeah, you've been a little busy.
Like
it's hard to wander when you can't walk.
Yeah. It's hard to wander when you can't walk, but I'm still trying. Right now I'm trying to do
Mm-hmm.
exercise stuff to like show him you're like, yeah, even if this stuff happens, you can still stay active.
Yeah. Yesterday he walked over a mile in crutches. So he walked over a half mile, and then later on we did another like probably 0.75 miles in crutches. So
Yeah, it was rough.
and then we're about to go to Columbus and run. I'm gonna run 2 miles, and he's gonna
wheelchair at least 4 miles.
He's going to wheelchair at least 4 miles, so I guess I better do 4 miles too. All right. See you guys later.
Peace.